Good evening. I'm Richard Asimus, and I am the leader for American Promise Ohio Southern District, and also the facilitator for tonight's town hall. So the format, I want to give you the quick highlights of the format. We will end at 8 or a little after. Might as well talk about the ending as we begin. Our second one is that our purpose for tonight is the topic, which is toward equality, getting money out of elections and policy making. We're working tonight with a panel of 4 prominent candidates in Ohio, plus the president of American Promise, very distinguished. 2 of the candidates are running for the US Congress and 2 for the Ohio Senate. The candidates come from various parts of the state. Now, participants, your job is really important because we beg for your questions and comments to our panelists. And the easy way to do that is to find the Q&A, or is it called questions and answers, something like that. Q&A, there's 2, chat and Q&A, but we're asking if you would to put it into the Q&A. We'll try to keep track of the chat as well, but go to Q&A if you can and put in your questions. And if you wish, you can address one of the panelists or all of the panelists. If you wish to, you can pinpoint either one or all, and they can be little questions or they can be big, bold questions. That's up to you. Ellen Greene Bush here is going to help us all. She's the leader of American Promise Ohio, and she will be asking the questions from the chat to the panelists there. For balance and a quick pace, we are going to be having the speaking times of the panelists time limited. 3 minutes for opening statements, 2 minutes for answering of questions, and 1 minute for a closing statements. This sounds like a presidential debate, but it's not. And Ellen will ring a chime to remind the panelists that their time is up. At the end of our work, Azor Cole will be sharing, he's the state manager of American Promise, and he will share important next action steps to move the goals forward, which is important to move to action. Now let's move into the substance of the town hall. American Promise volunteers have asked many Ohio candidates and elected officials of both parties to take the American Promise Pledge, which is meant to limit, the pledge is to limit the undue influence of money in elections and government. Here's the pledge. I'm going to put this up on the screen share so you really can follow more closely. Hoping that's here for you to see. Each candidate or elected official pledges that I think of this as a real pledge. I support amending the United States Constitution to guard against corruption and protect liberty, federalism, and the equal rights of free speech by limiting the undue influence of money in elections and government. I pledge.
Do you want us to read with you?
Oh, that would be nice touch. Thank you. Let's do this part because this is the real heart. You know, the other issue is above. Thank you, panelists. That is so touching. Yes. Okay, ready? I pledge to use my office to advance a constitutional amendment addressing the above issues through passage and ratification in effective ways, such as sponsoring or co-sponsoring bills, resolutions, or other legislation,
advancing
proposal
or
ratification of this amendment, voting in favor of such bills and resolutions in committee, subcommittee, or floor votes, and publicly advocating for the necessity of this amendment. Wow, you are powerful. Yeah, thank you so much. So that gives you that framework. And we want to now begin with our panelists to introduce yourself, each panelist, and give us your sharing your perspective on these things, your suggestions. Let's begin with you, Jeff. Give us the context and where this all fits in the National American Promise work, such important work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Richard, and hello, everybody. We'll have people coming in and joining this town hall as we go forward, and looking forward to sharing this afterwards with all of our members all over Ohio, and invite you to do that as well, because this is a very important conversation. We're very proud and pleased that the candidates on this call for both serving the country and the people of Ohio by running and serving and being willing to serve in this very challenging time for the country. I'm Jeff Clements, American Promise President. We are a national, nonpartisan organization leading the way for this constitutional amendment that will allow us to get the concentrated money out of our political system so that the people, the interests of the people, are represented in our political system. We have many members across Ohio, and thanks to Richard and Ellen and Ted, who's on the call, with chapters in Cincinnati, Port Clinton, Columbus, and Ohioans like Nina Turner on our advisory council, and Greg Moore, and many friends and supporters. So thank you to everybody in Ohio. The context is the reason we need a constitutional amendment to do what virtually all Americans across the political spectrum want, which is to have some reasonable rules about how money is used in our political system, is because the Supreme Court has kind of run away and lost their way about striking down even the most reasonable limits on money in our political system. It's wrong on the law, it's wrong on our Constitution, and the people will fix it, as we have 27 other times with constitutional amendments. This pledge is very important. What these folks have done tonight and 40 candidates across Ohio have done is pledge to use their office resolutions and so forth for the constitutional amendment. 20 states have now passed resolutions. So that's a real thing. Congress, there's 220 supporters in the House, 47 supporters in the Senate for this constitutional amendment. This is for real. So we are really looking for all voters all across the country, any office, any candidate, any political party. We have to know where people stand. Will you support this amendment and put power back in the hands of the people and take it a little bit rebalanced compared to the less than 1% of the country that has now provided $60 to $70 billion into our political election system since the Citizens United decision 10 years ago. So big thanks to our candidates. We are cross-partisan. These good folks are all Democrats tonight, but there are good folks on the Republican Party and Libertarian Party running as well. And I know my time is up. I invite those of you who are trying to encourage our Republican friends to get on board, tune in and sign up for American Promises, the conservative case. We're getting money out of politics on July 28th. We'll have Republicans from Tennessee and many of our members, including our board member, Jim Rubens, Republicans making a strong case from the Republican perspective on this issue. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I thank you for joining us, and I will get out of the way so you can hear from your elected and running candidates for office. Thank you, Richard. Thanks to all of you. Yeah. And back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you for dedicating your life to this and in creating, you're the president, but also the founder of it. Thank you so much. Also the founder of American Promise. Alaina, would you step forward and introduce yourself and give us the perspectives of your campaign and how this might touch in your values and principles?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Richard. And everybody who's behind this and who has made this possible and this pledge possible. It's so important. There is perhaps nothing more patriotic than we can be doing right now than fighting for campaign finance reform, because it is that big of a problem. I'm a mom, I'm a business owner, but above all, I'm an American. And right now, today, I'm so honored to have a chance to pay it forward to this country that I love so much, that's given me so many chances in my life. And just a little bit about me, in my 20s, I left an abusive relationship and I found myself a single mother, and I earned $8 an hour as a secretary at my very first radio station. I had been a radio reporter in the first phase of my career, but I nearly lost everything. But thanks to my education and much love and support from my family and a lot of hard work, I climbed back up. And I went on to build 2 businesses in digital and tech, and most recently, a national women's network for women in digital and tech. And I was born and raised right here in Delaware, Ohio, in District 12, where I'm running now. I had never, ever considered running for political office, ever, until the end of August of this calendar year, or last calendar year of 2019, the end of August, somebody in my network suggested that I run for Congress, and here I am. And most immediately, the first thing that comes up as a new candidate from the powers that be, the DCCC or Emily's List, and those are 2 huge endorsements you look for, is how much money do you have? How much money can you raise? Do you know how to raise money? And I said, well, I worked like 3 jobs in college to get through college, and one of them was cold call sales. I sold classified ads for a newspaper, and I'm pretty darn good at it. But I also, I know what it takes, and I know that right now, the thing is that elections are obviously incredibly expensive because we've got a multimedia front we have to run, and it's more expensive to run and to win. And right now, the onus is on individual donors to essentially donate to my campaign in order to assure that a good, true, values-driven elected official holds office in their district. And that is not right. We should not have to ask individuals to pay for democracy to work. Meanwhile, of course, my opponent, who ultimately might outraise me, we just outraised him 3 times. We raised 3 times as much as he did in Q2. And we got outraised with individual contributions 20-1 to his. So I think corporate PACs are drying up, ironically, because of the economy. Anyway, I could go on. I am quite shell-shocked by this experience, and I can't wait to talk more tonight about it.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. And thank Bravo for stepping up, Alaina, and to become a candidate. I mean, that means it takes so much courage and so much grit to do the work. Yes. Now, Kate, running for Congress. We have 2 powerful women running for Congress. Kate, please introduce yourself and what this topic means to you.
Yes. Thanks, Richard and Ellen and Jeff and everybody for being here and the opportunity to be here myself. This means a lot to me. I'm Kate Schroder, as Richard mentioned. I'm running for Congress in Ohio's 1st district. So it's half of Hamilton County and all of Warren County in the Cincinnati area in the southwest corner. And I'm running because we have so many real and pressing problems in our country. We have a pandemic that's flattening us. We have an economy that's ground to a halt. We have systemic racism that's perpetuated for hundreds of years. And we're not going to solve them with the status quo. And the status quo is a result of the system that we have and the realities of our current campaign finance. And what it's led to is for too long, we've been electing people that focus on pulling us apart and what divides us. And I believe we need more doers who bring people together and get things done. And I am a low ego mom. I know how to de-escalate. I do it every day. During the pandemic, I do it 10 times a day. And I think we need more of that in Congress. So I grew up here in Cincinnati, born and raised. I am raising my 5-year-old son and 7-year-old daughter here as well. I have spent my career in public health. I actually have an MBA, and I have focused on bringing business skills to solve public health challenges. I lived in Zambia for 2 years in my late 20s, early 30s, and I've since managed large international global health projects to reduce mortality rates for kids. I've led efforts to reduce drug prices and expand treatment access. Here in Cincinnati, I've served on the Board of Health for the past 4 years and led efforts to expand dental services in our public health clinics. And I am also have personal experience with healthcare. I'm 43 now. When I was 33, I went through Hodgkin's lymphoma and had to go through 4 months of chemo. So I know firsthand what it's like when your survival is dependent on access to healthcare. And one of the big motivations for me to run, I'm running against Steve Shabbat. He's voted over 15 times against coverage for pre-existing conditions. He's voted 50 times to take healthcare away from people without alternative plans. And the reason he votes this way is because he is very beholden to special interests. He takes a lot of money from pharmaceutical companies, from the gun lobby, and from many others. Even though, you know, the majority of his constituents feel a certain way, he's voting in an opposite way. And I think we need leaders who have the moral courage to go in there and do the right thing. I had a job that I love that will always, you know, I can always go back to, and I'm not afraid. You know, I am running to make a difference and to represent everybody, not just the people that vote for me, but to represent the entire district and to do what is best for our communities. And I think as I am really proud and honored to take this pledge, because it is undermining our democracy right now, the role of campaign of dark money and special interests. So I am proud to take it. I'm honored to be here and look forward to taking it.
Good timing. Wow. And thank you for stepping up too. I mean, it's just as wonderful. Our candidates are so powerful, and for signing the pledge, because we asked your opponent, and I'm sure all the opponents here, to also sign. And for their own reasons, we couldn't get them on tonight to explain. But I like what Jeff shared about Tennessee coming up, where there's more Republican leadership coming from that state. Now, Crystal, to introduce yourself and what this subject means to your campaign and to the values you're bringing as a candidate for the Ohio Senate.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Ellen and Jeff. It's just been awesome getting to know you all, and I'm excited to work with you guys in the future and hopefully for many, many more years getting this through. I am born and raised in the Senate district that I'm hoping to represent. My background is in community mental health, arguably the most underfunded sector of the healthcare industry. And I worked with 14 to 21-year-olds with really severe and symptomatic mental health disorders. And it was my job to be an advocate and a fighter for those kiddos who just couldn't represent themselves for a variety of reasons. And I stayed in that position until I had my first son, Noble, who is 9, and he was born with a very rare genetic disorder. And so I became a case manager from my living room instead of from my office, which was a very interesting shift for me and for our family. And really, as my son began getting healthier and more medically stable, I started to take on the legislative issues that I had identified working in direct care in mental health, and then as a parent of a child with special needs and global developmental delays. So I worked for about 7 months with Senator Sherrod Brown to renew CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program. I am currently a legislative advocate for Save the Children, the large NGO, and we work on affordable childcare and universal pre-K programming in the States, and we help run our foreign aid programs abroad. And I just continue to love that work. I love being an advocate and a fighter for people. But it is very interesting coming into this. And you know, Alaina shared, you know, the first question people say is, how much can you raise? And as someone who comes from a direct care background, I am not independently wealthy, as you can imagine. And I'm not well connected with a ton of wealthy people. So that, you know, is a very big challenge, and it really forces you to do the work. And to get out in your community and talk to people and enroll people in the vision that you have for the state of Ohio. And that's the work of public service. That's the work that I am excited to do. It's what every single, you know, politician and public servant should be out there doing, is listening to their constituency. And I know, you know, through my work, you know, both at the state and federal level, watching those special interest groups, you know, come in and fund candidates, it really deters from the opportunity for people to meet with their community members and hear the needs and adequately represent them. So that's something I'm very passionate about. I'm so incredibly proud to take this pledge. And again, I'm so incredibly proud to work with all of you and, you know, to get across that finish line and to make real change.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Crystal. And one of the joys of doing this town hall is getting to know each other, because this, you know, we call, as an organizer, it's relational organizing. And so we develop this through relationships. Ah, Joel, these powerful women. Now here you are to give your
intimidated.
yeah, I would be a little into, yeah. So please introduce yourself, Joel, and what this subject means to you, this topic means to you.
Well, I'm Joel Odoricio. I'm a father, I'm an educator, and I'm a labor organizer. So I've been an artist for, I don't know, 30 years. And I've sort of followed politics as a hobby, but never imagined myself actually doing what I'm doing now. But for the past 14 years, I've been teaching at Bowling Green. And every year I see it getting harder and harder for my students to afford to be in school. I know growing up here in Ohio that when I went to Ohio State in the 80s, I was able to pay my way through college with one full-time job. And I know from watching my students that it's absolutely not possible for them to do that right now.
Mm-hmm.
A chunk of the reason for that is because when I was in school, Ohio supported 70% of the cost of my education. And right now, Ohio is only covering about 20% of the cost of our students' education. So that translates to about $10,000 a year for each student at my school. I know that we've invested in the past in our education, and I'm committed to making sure that we invest in education moving forward. So that's why I'm running. And the reason I feel comfortable doing that is because of the work that I've been doing for my union. I actually helped form our chapter of the AAUP at Bowling Green. And for the past 10 years, I've been on the negotiating team for 3 contracts. I've been on the executive council in a variety of capacities. And I've seen changes. I've seen the pay for the faculty go up. 2 years ago, Bowling Green was rated one of the top public institutions in the country for teaching quality. So teaching quality's gone up. We have a great relationship with the administration. The students have benefited, the faculty have benefited, because we work together and we set priorities that are good for our community. I believe in the same thing for our state and for our country. So I'm running with a lot of faith and not a lot of money. And as a teacher, clearly I'm not self-funding either. The first questions that I got were, how much money can you raise? How big is your network? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't. So just like everybody else, I'm calling my constituents. That part's very rewarding. I get to hear about what people care about, what people are afraid of, what people need. What's shocked me is how much people care about this issue. I hear about people caring for education, but I also hear about people caring about gerrymandering. And I hear about people worried about their health care, but I also hear people worried about democracy because, you know, politicians are not responsive to the people who vote. They're responsive to the people who pay for their elections.
Yeah. Oh, we're so honored for the 4 of you here, 5 of you here, to be our panelists for tonight, including you, Jeff, of course, is the holding the whole framework of this work about money and the undue influence. Now we're ready. Ellen, as leader of American Promise Ohio, you're going to represent the participants here. What is the first one?
The first question is from Justin. Have you been either embraced or resisted by the Democratic Party leaders for your stance on campaign finance reform and support for this constitutional amendment?
Okay, this is up for grabs, or I'll call on somebody if you let it lay out there too long.
I'll go first.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have not had any pushback personally. You know, a part of that is because we have had a pretty successful fundraising experience so far, and that has come from individual donors. 96% of our donations come from grassroots contributions from people within the community and other people, individuals that are interested in the state. So I think there's a real opportunity to do campaigns differently, and if you're able to execute that, then the party will get behind you. I know that I'm not the only opinion on that, and that other people have had different experiences, and I want to honor and just recognize that. But I think it's possible, and if you can do it, then the party, doesn't really have much of a choice but to get behind you. So
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Crystal. Who's next? Yes, Kate.
Yeah, so somewhat similar to Crystal, so running for federal office, it is very much aligned with the values of the Democratic Party. So when I was out in DC with the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee last fall in October, they brought a bunch of candidates out. And one of the sessions they held for us was on campaign finance reform and HR 1, which is actually the very first bill that was passed by the current congressional session. And it was addressing campaign finance reform, getting sort of special interest in dark money out. It was addressing voter rights and also gerrymandering. So, and I appreciated that was very much values that they want to get that passed. Now, the other interesting thing is in one-on-one conversations, they will say, I'm somebody who's taken, I refuse corporate PAC money. So I am reliant, like Crystal's saying, on individual contributions to be able to get my message out. And that's a huge disadvantage relative to the person I'm running against, where 40% of his money comes from corporate PACs. So, and they will say to me, some of the party folks will say, well, you got to be careful because, you're really tying your arms and that's at a disadvantage, but you have to do what you think is right. And I think it's right. And so they're very supportive of it, but they are very eyes wide open about the challenges so that, going in what that's going to mean for your campaign.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate. Alaina?
Yeah, I think the reality is that so first of all, a majority of an elected congressperson's time in a contested district. So Kate and I are both running in purple districts, and Crystal, your district might still be a purplish district, and we have to fundraise a lot. So I know the sitting Congress people, from what I have heard, are spending upwards of 70% of their time on the phone doing what's called call time. As far as taking this pledge, I've not had any resistance to that. I'm not sure. I'm a new candidate. I'm an outsider. I'm not sure if they even know or care that I've taken it. They should. But I think that when it comes down to it, it's a matter of once you're elected, taking corporate money is tempting because you can get off of call time and do your job. And I can see that that's going to be really tough in the future. I can see why it happens because you're on call time and you have to do call time.
Yes, it is. Joel, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I haven't had any resistance to this effort. I think the Democrats understand that we need to change the way the system is run or we're going to lose track of our democracy. Just for the heck of it, a couple nights ago, I was doing some research on how much it costs to run a race. I know it's late in the game for me to know those numbers, but what I found was that in 2010, Republicans outspent Democrats 10-1 in Ohio. So the Republican Party from who knows where was able to come up with $4.5 million to give to their candidates before they had to make a single phone call. And that was shocking to me. The Democrats rolled out about $350,000 that year. And what happened was the crazy gerrymander that we've been living under for the last 10 years. So on a philosophical level, I think we all understand what it means to, face the need to raise money for an election. But on a pure nuts and bolts level, we can't compete 10-1 and we shouldn't have to. And it's, the Supreme Court ruling that said that money is free speech gave free speech to corporations, not people. And we can't compete with that.
Yeah, good going. It sounds like the title of your book, Jeff.
Well,
Preparations on
it does indeed, Richard. And could I just offer
Oh, yeah.
one thought on this from the national perspective? That
Yes.
you know, the both parties, of course, are you know, powerful, raise and spend lots and lots of money, and you know, we think that people in both parties, leadership in both parties, don't particularly like how it's working right now, and we'll see support for this kind of a fundamental shift and change because we have a systemic problem. I won't speak to Ohio, but I will say, you know, for the Democratic Party, we had 13 of the presidential candidates take this very same pledge, from Bernie Sanders to Elizabeth Warren to Steve Bullock, all across the different perspectives in the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, we haven't heard back from the White House, but we did hear from my former governor, Bill Weld, who signed the pledge on the Republican side. And I want to say that you may have seen the word federalism in the pledge. That matters a lot to Republicans. And that came out of the new feedback we got in New Hampshire in 2016, where the Republicans lost a Senate seat, outspent by Democrats, $132 million for one Senate seat, when Maggie Hassan beat Kelly Ayotte. And, you know, that's a state with 700,000 voters. That money did not know anything about New Hampshire, and it cared less. And the New Hampshire voters really felt like they did not have a voice. So I think, you know, neither party is going to unilaterally disarm, but I think we have a big opportunity with leadership like the folks on this call tonight to really do a systemic change. So in the future, you know, future Americans will have a much better shot, and we can make reasonable rules that both parties will have to live with, all parties will have to live with.
Terrific. Thank you, Jeff. Participants, remember, put your comments in either one, but we're preferring the Q&A rather than the chat. And our panelists have answered really well. So let's see what the next world opens up from a question or a comment.
Okay, we have a question from Ted Celeste. How do you do your campaigning and especially fundraising in the COVID environment?
Yeah, who's first this time?
This is my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah.
If I may, just jump in.
Sure, please do, yeah.
Okay, so my background is in digital and tech, and I mentioned I was a reporter and radio before, so I'm a communicator, but again, most recently in a virtual world. So I've been actually doing Zoom meetings like this for 2 years with my women's network because we have chapters across the country. So when when COVID hit, obviously this is the worst possible thing any of us can imagine, but I always try to find the silver lining. And what I see is a dramatic opportunity to disrupt the political industry in the way that we fundraise. So you can't hear my kids, but they're all around me right now. We're fundraising from our living rooms right now, Crystal and Kate and Joel, and we have an opportunity to reform the system, but also we can win with less. I am crushing my opponent on digital and social because he wouldn't know what the internet was if it hit him in the head. And this year, people are tuning in more to Facebook than they ever have. Social networks are critical news delivery mechanisms, but we're here and we can run a virtual and online campaign, and that costs far less than broadcast television. And what we're finding as well is we're going to run a grassroots campaign. So we're doing all of the digital in-house, and it's going really, really well. And I hope when we win, we can say, look at that. We spent less on TV than anyone ever has to win and flip districts like these. That's my hope, because part of breaking the system is finding a new way to win with less money and less dependence on costly consultants from DC and expensive, ridiculous broadcast television ads that not very many people watch anymore.
Yeah. Way to go.
Yeah, this is a world of excitement and optimism for me.
Yeah.
You can change a lot by winning with digital and less and winning on less.
Yes, yeah. Who would like to add or another perspective? Joel.
I'd love to just say congratulations. That was a very hopeful statement.
They're all going to want to. You're a consultant now.
I'm on the other end of that spectrum a little bit. I got into politics because I liked meeting people, and the face-to-face meeting my constituents, talking to them, understanding their needs was one of the most rewarding parts of it for me. So it's been a challenge to move entirely online. And I'm going to confess I didn't have a Facebook page until I started running for office. But, you know, as a teacher, I moved my classes online with all the other teachers this spring. And I am equally hopeful that this is a new type of campaigning. I'm able to reach out to people. We're able to identify who we're reaching out to in a way that was never possible before. Especially with during the primary, we were able to identify every voter here in Ohio because everybody voted by mail. So we're working really hard on early vote by mail strategies to make sure that as many people as possible have access to voting. We're working really hard with an internet strategy, developing new ways. I'm learning how to be an actor. I've never had to do that before, but putting my face on the screen is part of what the situation demands now. And just like everybody else on the planet, I'm adapting to the new way we're living.
Yeah, terrific.
Good job, Joel.
Anything to add? Way to go.
I gave up my flip phone.
Joel,
Kate.
I've been through like every stage of grief about not meeting people, not being in living rooms in the same way. And my kids are 5 and 7, and the parades and the festivals and these things that are so joyful and so much part of our community connecting. So I feel your pain on that. And I agree with Alaina, what you're saying too, that I've been focused on, okay, what are the advantages?
Right.
So you can press your advantage on we have to. Social media, you can do some virtual fundraising events where you have folks, it's easy, we had one where Mayor Pete joined, we have one with Curtis Sittenfeld coming up. It's easier for them to join an event when it's virtual than actually coming here. So there are advantages like that. And we have 40 interns this summer from 4 countries and 25 schools because we have a virtual summer internship program. So I think you've got to look at ways like that. And the other sort of silver lining is the actual members of Congress now have also had to be a bit more adaptive and do some remote committee hearings and other things that, if elected, will benefit those, the ability to be in your district a bit more. And those of us that are working parents and really struggle with that. So I do think there are some of these silver linings that we're learning to work and connect in new ways, even though we are all so much yearning for the in-person time too.
Yes. Crystal.
Yeah, I am definitely a combination of all three. I am hopeful and angsty and nervous, all of those things. But I will say, and I'm going to call out my buddy Joel, because he is way better at this than he lets on. I think one of the coolest things and one of the biggest benefits that I've noticed to campaigning during COVID is that we're able to do town halls all the time, as much as we want. Where, before it would take so much planning and reserving a space and, putting out invitations. Now it's, a Facebook invitation, and Joel and I did one, what was it, a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now. And, at any given time at a candidate forum, at least in the primary, we would get like 10 to 25 people on average at those in-person events. Joel and I had 75 people that watched live. And then since then, because, you can leave the video up, we've had thousands of people view that town hall, which I think is absolutely incredible. It really, I think, is going to bring people into the political experience and into, the political realm that maybe, wouldn't be able to attend, if you have small kids, or if you are not well, or you're to, have any kind of barrier to getting out of your home. This is a way that we can reach you, and really also on top of that, provide voter education, which we never get to do on the campaign trail. Usually it's, short quips, it's very limited. Joel and I got to do deep dives into several issues that we know that our constituents care about and that our experience kind of overlaps and highlights. And it's been awesome. And we're seeing that be very effective. So I think it's going to be, as terrible as this has been, for everyone, I do think that that's a real opportunity. And so I'm looking forward to doing that more. And I think we can turn that into fundraising opportunities as well.
Yeah, good going. I like the way this is unfolding with the 4 candidates, and now we get the perspective from the American Promise center of the world there with you, Jeff, and Azor too. What's your, based on that question and the sharings here, what's your perspective?
Well, you know, we do call in Boston here the hub of the universe, but I don't think we're the center of the world.
I thought you meant Port Clinton, Richard.
You know, I just admire the candidates of all the candidates across the country who've adapted so fast, and frankly, the voters. You know, we got a lot of voters trying to make sure we'll be able to vote safely and securely, and I think Americans are really determined to vote, and but it's a big challenge. So, you know, we at American Promise have chapters all over the country, as you know, and those great meetings. I miss going to Ohio and seeing you in Cincinnati and Port Clinton and Columbus and Cleveland, and I miss going to our chapters all across the country. But I find, like the candidates, and I'm sure Azor does too, the ability to connect is in some ways enhanced, and the ability to amplify and accelerate even some of the big reforms we need to do. So I think it'll be like other times in American history where, you know, we have a deep challenge and we come out the other side much better than we went in, and we don't go back to the way it was before. We come out to something new and better, and that's where this is headed, I think.
Terrific, good. Ellen, what is next?
Well, I wanted to ask a policy question, because not only does unlimited and hidden money affect elections, it also affects policy decisions. And 2 really important issues to independent voters this year is corruption in politics and healthcare. And I'm wondering if our candidates, especially Kate and Crystal, you have experience with healthcare. How do you see these issues affecting one another, especially during this pandemic?
Who's first?
I'll take it back.
Either way. Very much so, Ellen. I mean, you're right. It affects both who can run for office, right? Who has the ability to run, who wins, and then it affects when you get there, what you're willing to do. And in healthcare, I mean, it's interesting in this district, healthcare was, we did a poll on issues back in January. And so pre-pandemic, healthcare was the #1 issue across every demographic, geographically, racially, by age. And now that's even more so. This is such an important issue, and I do think people want, you know, members of Congress to be there and do the right thing and not be influenced by special interests. And that's not the case now. I mean, one specific example I like to talk about all the time, because I've worked on it, is pharmaceutical prices. So we are the only country in the world that I am aware of where we do not negotiate when the government, the #1 buyer of prescription drugs, you know, when there's the new hepatitis C drug out, the government is a price taker. They are banned. And this was part of the passage of ACA. The Republicans negotiated this provision where the government is banned from negotiating on prescription drugs. And that's crazy, because even any business person would agree. And I worked on this internationally when we were working with countries to get drug prices down. You can change the dynamics of a market. Right now in the US, we have low volume, high margin for some of our most critical drugs. And you can sit down with these companies at the table and say, look, we understand, you know, you need to invest in research and development, but we have to expand access. It's got to be lower volume, lower margin over a high volume, and have that back and forth. And we've been prevented from being able to do that. And that is directly because of some of the special interest money and the refusal to do the right thing, even though this is an issue where the majority of Americans would agree. So I fundamentally believe, I mean, healthcare is it's a human right, and we need people that are there able to make the right decisions on pre-existing conditions, on moving towards universal coverage and anything that expands access towards universal coverage, improving quality and reducing prices. And it's the special interests on this are really one of the big barriers that's preventing that.
Yeah. Crystal, would you like to add?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I was spending time advocating for CHIP, I was, you know, very aware by the number of politicians or, you know, congressmen and women who would take a meeting with me in person because I did not come bearing checks. And so it was very interesting to me, you know, to figure that out and how you get those in-person meetings. But the people who get them over and over and over again are people like lobbyists for the pharmaceutical companies. All they have to do is make a phone call, and they have a direct line that they, you know, are connected to, and they can get a member meeting and get the ear of their representative. For every one congressperson, there are at least 10 pharmaceutical lobbyists that are allocated to each and every one of them. That is so many lobbyists, and that's just one sector of the healthcare industry. And so, you know, our elected officials really are inundated by these lobbyists. And so it's hard. I mean, I can imagine as a representative that it would be hard to, you know, sort through all of that noise to hear what your constituents actually have to say and care about it, especially when they just come with checks and checks and checks. And I mean, I've definitely experienced that firsthand. I know, you know, our family really has had a very interesting healthcare story trying to afford my son's care. Just one of his medications is $5,000 a month. And so it's wildly expensive, and everyday families are not being heard in DC and really at the state level as well, you know, from surprise medical billing to the cost of prescription drugs to, you know, the ways that insurance companies donate as well to individual candidates. That's a thing that happens. There are just so many barriers there that are in place from politicians actually hearing from their people, and it has to stop.
Thank you, Crystal. Who else would like to add? If anything, there's not a requirement to add each time, but if you
I
wish.
wouldn't mind speaking to this a little bit. Both my parents are actually research physicians. So I guess there's a mistaken understanding that drug companies actually fund research. They do very little funding of research. The vast majority of medical research, drug research happens from the federal level. So grants from public sponsors to public institutions. It's not until drugs are in the very last stage where a drug company will purchase the patent and start doing testing on it. So you know, every country around the world negotiates prices as a nation except us. And we're really missing the boat on that. And I think what I've found interesting is that people believe in our country that most of the legislation happens at the federal level. But in fact, almost all insurance regulation happens at the state level. So, you know, we would be better off negotiating as a country for our drug prices. And we definitely need to understand that our state legislators are the ones who have the biggest day-to-day impact on what our medical experience is.
Yeah, thank you. Alaina or Jeff?
I wanted to ask, give Alaina an opportunity because she has been, she started her own small businesses. Mm-hmm. How has your ability to start and maintain a small business been affected by big money in politics and corporations? It's an issue that's really important to American Promise through our Business for American Promise group.
Mm-hmm. It's so, you know, only 50% of our small businesses in this country are still in business 5 years after they start. And that is an absolutely horrifying number. And if you think about our major corporations and the stock market today, in the middle of a pandemic, in a time when 30% of Americans, the early estimates are showing this month, couldn't pay their housing costs, their rent or their mortgage. but yet our stock market is fine and corporations are fine. You can imagine how hard it is to start a small business. And we were just talking about healthcare, and we have a healthcare system that is completely broken, and a huge onus of covering that healthcare cost is on small businesses to pay through employee benefits, right? Which I did as a small business owner. We offered full benefits to every employee, and it's so incredibly expensive when you are also up against corporations who pay zero in federal taxes, like Amazon, who are competing for your business. And you can see when you just follow the money. So my government teacher always told me in high school, follow the money and you will have your answers to every single question, you know, in the world. And you follow that money and it traces right back to giant big corporations and their lobbyists. And it's this, right now we are in this time where it's easy to feel defeated. And every day when I'm running and I'm you know, fundraising, and you just keep going and you keep going. And the only thing you have to say is we cannot let them win. We cannot let them take our country from us. But Ellen, yes, small businesses absolutely are affected by this, just as we all are in every aspect of our personal life, and it's heartbreaking. What we need to do is, especially as we're recovering from COVID, as we need an economic recovery, we've got to incentivize new businesses. And, you know, there need to be ideas on the table where if you start an innovative new business and a new emerging industry, or one that adapts to our new economy, whatever that looks like, you shouldn't have to pay taxes. You know, you should have an incentive to start a business for your first 5 years. We have to change those numbers.
Yeah, business and big money, and all your work at American Promise, Jeff, there's a direct correlation from your kind of higher view of the whole country with this business impact.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, Richard, but I think Ellen mentioned Business for American Promise, and that's Alaina put it exactly why so many business people are stepping into this too. It's a misconception, I think, that people may think business people will be against this amendment for some reason. Business people will be and are eager to get this fixed so they can get, not only all the issues that we all care about and talk about, but a better business environment, a better place for innovation in the economy than we have with this system now. But one of the big problems with money is that it interferes with the relationship of the candidates and the elected officials and their constituents. So I'm going to pass as much as I can so there's more time for the candidates and the people of Ohio to have this conversation.
Yeah,
right back
and
So.
It's hard to believe this is so rich, but we are drawing to the close. Not the exact point yet, because we want a 1 minute closing from each of you, and also a few minutes with Azor about next action steps. Is there something, Ellen, maybe we could do a question with a 1 minute response? They're so skillful with answering.
Well, I haven't had a chance to ask Joel a question yet. And I wonder, Joel, would you rather have a question asked about unions or Lake Erie?
Nice.
Well, I have huge opinions on Lake Erie because we're drinking the water from it, but
yes,
I feel more knowledgeable about unions. So you go with that.
Well, many people think that unions are a big spender for campaigns and that they compete with corporations to influence candidates. And from your perspective, how are unions different from big corporations in terms of campaign spending?
Well, as a labor leader, I can tell you that I haven't made a single dime working for the union. So all of the work that I did for my union was volunteer work. And, I've been on the contract negotiating team 3 times now. And it was 2 years to settle down on our first contract. So my friend figured out we spent about 1,000 hours negotiating for the first contract. So we've cut that time in half. So, each contract is now 500 hours of negotiating. But that was me working for my peers. That was me working for my students. I did that as a labor of love because I know that we were making positive changes for the university, for the faculty and for the students that were coming through the university. And if I take a check from a union, I feel great about that because I know that that money comes from 100,000 people that are in a union. It's not coming from one owner of one corporation or possibly a foreign owner of a foreign corporation who's meddling with our elections. It's coming from people who live here and work here and have interests who are being represented by other elected officials, which are their elected union officials.
Okay, thank you.
Terrific.
Okay, Richard, back to you.
Okay, yes. And if you've put something in the Q&A in the chat, and if we can respond to that, because we have the contact information, I believe, Ellen, speaking for American Promise Ohio and perhaps Azor for the American Promise national team, we will get back to you and maybe even put those out to some of the candidates for some quick responses from you or your campaign managers. So I wish in some ways it's fascinating, it went fast. Let's do a 1-minute closing of how this touches your heart, how this touches not only the practical parts of your campaign, but also the spirit of what it means to be a candidate and what affects money, undue influence of money. And let's do opposite order to how we began with the opening statements. Would you share for 1 minute, Joel, what touches you here at the end?
You know, I never got into politics for the power or the money. I'm for real a true believer. I believe that I can make a difference in Columbus, and spending so much time figuring out how to pay for a campaign takes away from, it reduces the time I can spend making the vision happen. So I want to spend my time representing the people of Ohio, and you know, the more we can get money out of politics, the more I'll be able to devote time to helping people.
Yeah, that's really nicely put. Crystal, what for you is the kind of the closing sharing for us?
Yeah, I think as an advocate and as someone who is a grassroots organizer, to the core, I just feel such beauty and power with people. Behind every single one of us candidates is an army of people behind us, volunteers, donors, other activists, other elected officials who are supporting us. And really it's that team that is the beauty of running for office, is, coming together and working together. And I think the American Promise really reflects an opportunity for America to work together as a team again. Ultimately, that's the goal, is for us to be unified, and for us to appreciate our differences well. And I think that this opportunity is a great step in the right direction for our country. And I'm excited to be part of it, and I'm honored. So thank you guys again for all that you've done to facilitate this and bring this movement forward.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. And Kate, what comes from your spirit?
Yes, so thank you. Similar to Crystal, I agree. We are all individuals. But it's the power of our community coming together and the ripple effect that we can all have together, saying that enough is enough, that our country, our community deserves better leadership, and deserves leadership that is independent and free to do the right thing. And that's what motivates me. In Ohio, we have 16 congressional seats, only 4 are Democratic, 12 are Republican, even though, we're roughly 50-50 as a state. And that is because of the influence of money and the gerrymandering. And we can change these things. This seat down here in Ohio 1, we are currently polling at 1%. We're in a statistical tie. I'm at 47, he's at 48. This district is absolutely flippable this time. If anybody wants to get involved, it is the power of movement and all of us together. And we can, kforcongress.com, we can share our links to how to get involved. But everything's remote, and we're doing a huge push on voter registration.
Yes, thank you, Kate, so much. Alaina.
Yay, thank you for this. Thanks again for hosting. I think, we all want this change, but we are in a quagmire. We do have people outraising us. We are up against a dark money machine. And so we're in this tough spot where we all, the people, have to fund these campaigns. So just remember that, don't forget that, support all of these candidates on this call with a donation, or get your friends to donate. And see, really, every little dollar does make a big difference. And it is the most beautiful thing to see those donations come in. And each time I see them, I just see flames, sparks of power. And I know we can flip the 12th. We had 30,000 new registered Democrats in our district in the primary. 30,000, and my opponent won by 14,000 votes. So we're going to win, and we can change things, but we do need to fund it in the meantime, and that's the spot we're in. So keep that in mind, spread the word, and let's keep fighting. And once we win, we can change it all. We're going to have a blue wave.
Yeah, good. And Jeff, would you mind if we took the American Promise baton and passed it to Azor for the closing from your perspective?
Not at all. Let me pass it with a handoff word of thanks to all of these candidates, to our members in Ohio, and to folks all around the state who are tuning in and working hard to save our democracy. I do want to say, maybe Azor can put in the chat, our July 28th event with the conservative case for getting money out of politics.
Yes.
And it's because we want to be, not because we agree, but because we want to be on the same team solving problems, as Crystal said. But we absolutely need cross-partisan support to get an amendment. America without amendments isn't a place we want to live in. No Bill of Rights, no women voting, no equal protection, no slavery ban. Unbelievable how much the amendment process and Americans doing it has actually moved us closer to the promise of equal rights for everybody. And this is another one where we have to get it done, but you need 2/3 of Congress ratification in 38 states. That's why we're cross-partisan. That's why we have to get everybody on board who we can. So thanks to the candidates. Azor will tell you and our audience more about the pledge and how we can move forward to actually save the country and I would say the world, because when we save America, the world benefits too. So thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Azor.
Fantastic. Well, I'll be really quick and just share that nationally, it's about 230 candidates who've stepped up and signed this pledge. About a fifth of them are in Ohio, and it's because of the great work that Ellen and Richard and Ted and Janet and all of these Ohioans are doing. Sandra Toth on this call said, I just shared the email invitation with my candidate and she signed the pledge. So if there's one thing that you can do, it's go to americanpromise.net/pledge. Take a look at the resources. We've spelled it out. And I think you'll find that it's not so difficult when you reach out to your candidate, and you might have to follow up because they get a lot of emails, but follow up on the phone and let's keep getting these pledges coming in. You're going to get a recap email tomorrow. So another great way to amplify your impact, send it to a couple friends. We'll put that reminder in that email as well. And then the last, maybe most important thing you can do to set yourself up for success and really connect with a pretty incredible community, just get involved with, one of these nodes of American Promise volunteers if you're not already. I think, it's a great state to be in for this work. And Ellen, I know as the leader of this American Promise growing Ohio powerhouse, maybe if you wanted just to include your email in the chat here for everyone, that's probably the quickest way to directly connect to the group of people. So I'll end on that, but fantastic call and really exciting.
Right. And as Azor said, there'll be an email sent to you in the next day or two, maybe tomorrow or Monday, and they'll have the contact information for Ellen and for American Promise Ohio and for all the candidates and their campaign websites for the participants to have too. Thank you. I mean, we had an idea of how good this would be or how powerful it would be, and fun, really interesting too. And it's nice when you have an image and then it doubles or triples in its value or in its enjoyment. And it's because of each of you that came and participated, including participants. So thank you all so much. Stay safe, keep the spirits up, and we can do it together.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye,
so
everyone.
much. Let's stay in touch.